How's that look? See a whole different side of me. Hey, hey. Too much sauce. How's that? It's pretty decent. Cha-ching. news channel. This is my first time streaming Liftoff. Let me know what you think. Mic check, mic check.
Tell me.
People are angry.
Yep.
Just like all over the place. People are just mad.
Are you?
No. Look at me, man. I'm never angry.
Never? Ever?
Yeah, I get angry at times.
I agree, though. You're not one who I've observed going around just mad for a week or two at a time. Flares every now and then, usually for reasons that make sense, I think.
But I try to be strategic with it. Anger feels like an emotion that happens to you. Like it's not a thing that you get to control as much. It kind of happens. I don't know. It's inflicted upon you, but it's not really because you can kind of control it. You know what I mean?
I think you can kind of control it. Yeah. I don't know. I suppose it's both, right? Like, there are times where it feels like so much is happening. You know what? Let me put it this way. Did you ever watch that MTV show where they would they'd hide a camera and they'd try to make somebody mad? And if they made it to like 10 minutes of provocation without melting down, they get like $100.
I don't remember the show, but I love the format, and I feel like I've seen something. Like it's kind of like a hidden camera type show. Only the point is to make somebody mad.
Yeah, and they would just do infuriating things. And the funny thing that happened to me with that was, one, I watched the show angry when it first came on because I was doing one of those old man rants, you know, like where I go on Twitter and I'm like, these stupid new gas cans, I never spilled any gas until they made these dumb new gas cans.
Let's be legit. I tweeted out that in anger a long time ago as well. That is,
well, we have that in common.
We can be angry about that together.
Yes.
Let's just talk about anger today. Can we do that? What makes us mad?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the gas caps.
Yep.
Do you want to tell how you think it happened, or do you want me to go for it first?
No, I'd like to take a run at this because I feel passionately about it.
Go for it.
So what I think happened is that you had insurance companies involved. I think you had some people in the plastic industry involved. You had the government involved. And a very small group of people stood to benefit from this situation. And they got together and they were like, well, we could just cloak this dopey invention in some kind of veil of saving the environment. And instead of a gas can where you pick it up and then you take your little plastic cap off and then just gas just comes out and goes into wherever you wanted it to go, and then you use your brain and stop tilting the gas can when you're done, and it all makes sense. Instead of that, they created these unbelievably convoluted contraptions that are liable to break, that are a pain in the butt, that cause spillage and leakage around all of the seams. But a few key people made money on it. It's one of those utter failures of regulation and backdoor getting in bed between government and business situations. That's what I think happened.
You just used the opportunity to rail against the government, which was expected.
Would you stop at that? It's not railing against the government. Everyone is against businesses buying deals from the government.
Well,
No one on any side thinks that's good, right?
whatever. Okay, so
Here's you whatever me. I'm angry.
here's the deal. So this is how I think it happened.
Okay.
People used to have normal gas cans,
Yes.
and you used to be able to take the lid off the gas can and pour the gas into the lawnmower.
Yeah.
And then sometime what happened is somebody had a gas can in the back of their truck or whatever, and they hit a pothole, and it flipped over on its side, and it made gas go all over the back of their truck. I've had that happen with the old style gas cans, and somehow it caught on fire, and like maybe somebody got injured or something like that. And so the
somebody
pendulum,
named like
Yeah.
Brian, and then it was called Brian's Law.
exactly. And so the pendulum of regulation swung in one direction, and then suddenly everybody has to meet a certain standard of gas can. And the problem was whoever wrote that standard had never used a gas can ever. It was probably a lawyer that pays people to mow their yard and has never under any circumstances like cranked a mower or anything like that. I'm not stereotyping lawyers. I know a lot of lawyers that could do a lot of stuff.
That could mow a lawn. That's a high compliment.
You know what I'm trying to say. So they wrote this law, and they were just uninformed. And so it came time to sign the law, and nobody read it because that's the way things happen.
So
anyway,
whatever. So you're just going to rail on the government for writing bad laws.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can go with that.
Hit that tennis ball back, sucker.
But we're talking about anger here, and so like that conversation you and I just had, we didn't plan that, did we? So we just kind of like hit stuff back and forth pretty hard at each other at times. And so I don't know. How does anger affect you? What happens when have you ever seen somebody just completely melt down and lose it, and then they do it in a really famous way, and it ends up labeling that person as the person that has a temper? Have you ever seen that happen?
Absolutely. And what I think would be prudent for us would be to talk about times that's happened to us before we go and talk about times it's happened to others, or else I might accidentally be giving the impression that only everyone else has a temper, and that's not true. I have a very long fuse, but there are things that move the lighter about 3/4 of the way down the fuse and make it much, much shorter from time to time.
Okay.
So you want to go first? You want me to go first on stuff that makes you mad and your worst meltdowns ever?
Well, we need to talk about how we're going to do this, because I have things that make me mad, but my strategy is to keep it inside. I don't know. I like to think that I have a lot of self-control, but when it does spill out, it happens pretty aggressively. And for some reason, it usually happens with the people that I love the most. You know?
You always hurt the ones you love, the ones you shouldn't hurt at all.
I know. Why is that? It's like, you know, that, I don't know, I can think of...
Because you take them for granted, because they're not going anywhere. Because they love you and you've been through enough that you can do that. But if you do that to a business associate or somebody who you don't have that history and trust with, they might be out. So, yeah. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I think that's maybe the subconscious mental process we go through when we direct our anger at people who don't have it coming, who we love.
Yeah. I don't know why that is, but yeah. I mean, that's one theory, that you subconsciously know they'll stick around. I don't know. So one thing that makes me angry is when people drive slow in the fast lane. In the U.S., you know, the left lane is reserved for passing people and driving fast. And if you're driving slower, you're supposed to be on the right side. And so it just makes the traffic go. But a lot of times in the U.S., people will be driving in the left lane.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why, but if they're going slow and nobody can pass them, and you have to make that, you know, I'm going to pass you in the blind spot on the right side, I can feel myself doing it. Every time that happens, I always look at the person, and I have to, like, think bad things about that person.
I want them to know you inconvenienced me. But let me ask you a question on that. because as an engineer, you might answer this differently than I would. Is what frustrates you about that it wrecks the whole system, where if everybody does the things they're supposed to do, this just flows like veins and arteries and traffic works, and that's just nails on a chalkboard for you as a system person? Or is it a personal affront that feels like either through willfulness or lack of attentiveness, you are screwing me over?
C.S. Lewis wrote about this, actually. He said, the same thing that makes me angry at you when you jump in front of me in a line, he says, that's selfishness, right? The only reason you would get in front of me in line is because you value yourself over me. However, the emotion or the thing that makes me feel that towards you is the exact same emotion. The only difference is you acted on it and I didn't. So, like, you break in front of me in line, I'm going to be angry, right? And the reason I'm angry is because I value myself more than you. It's a subtle thing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I absolutely understand what you're saying. And to bring that all the way back to the pin that's in it, it means that you're answering my question. Is it about the larger system and the damage that their behavior does to the system, or is it more about you? If I'm hearing you right, you're saying it's more about the affront that you feel toward you.
It's selfishness, right? It's selfishness. Yeah, exactly. It's a violation of the golden rule, and the fact that I acknowledge that you broke the golden rule means that I also am guilty of not valuing you more than me. it's
guilty in a nicer way. I mean,
yeah.
It's one thing to be like, well, we all love ourselves. I mean, even the document that you and I both hold is pretty valuable. I love your neighbor as yourself. That's Jesus saying the golden rule. Well, the golden rule assumes that you love yourself. It doesn't seem to condemn it. The exhortation is that you're supposed to care about other people the same way. I mean, who does that?
Dude, we're in the stinking deep water right now.
We're like 5 minutes in. This is insane.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's back out. So what makes you angry? We got gas cans. We got people going slow in the fast lane. What you got?
Control and manipulation makes me angry.
Okay.
And
what do you
can say, oh, well, you're really liberty-minded. Well, I'm really liberty-minded because of that. My resentment of control and manipulation predates any political thoughts or anything I have about the world. Let me say it positively. I respect it and feel warm fuzzies inside when people come right at the thing and they're like, here is the outcome I want. Here is my proposal for how I would like to get it. Here is where I think you fit. What do you think? I like it. And if I reject it, okay, well, I rejected it, but I like the way you came at it. And what I don't like is okay, I have a secret thing I want. I know I can't have it if I admit it because it's dumb. It's a dumb thing to want. It's a selfish thing to want. So I'm going to try to work you over by pretending that I want something else.
Okay.
And then every time you try to help me get the thing that I say I want, I'm just going to be like, that will never work. We can't. And throw up obstacles to that and try to use me to work me around to get their weird outcome. And then I'm just a pawn. I hate that side door manipulation stuff. And what I want to do when I encounter it is crush it. And sometimes it's because of what's noble and right. But sometimes it's because, I see your game. No, you're not beating me at this. I'm going to drag this all into the light and make you so uncomfortable and know that somebody saw through it. Everything about that is what you just described as Lewis's observation. That is selfish on my part. That's not loving or nice or patient or bearing with somebody else or being forgiving. It's petty, but also cathartic. I'm proud of it. You asked me an honest question, I'm giving you an honest answer. So the manipulation thing usually goes hand in hand with the other thing that really makes me angry, and that's the control thing. And it's not just because leave me alone. I want to be left alone, get off my lawn, don't tread on me. The reason I don't like the controlling attitude from people is because of the line thing. It's an assertion that somehow their understanding of the things from their perspective needs to be dictated to other people. And that if you are around this person, you better bend the knee and do their thing because they have a way that stuff has to be. I just don't like it. I don't like it in religion. I don't like it in politics. I don't like it in friendship. It's codependent. It's weird. It's sticky. It's gross. It's cult-like. It just makes me out and out angry when people try to do that stuff with me. And 9 times out of 10, I will respond the way you just described with the cold anger. I'm going to stuff that down inside into the vault. I'm going to try to be cool here. But every now and then, my anger will manifest as snark. And I will fire back assertively in a way that lets somebody know, I see what you're doing. I caught it. I didn't like it. So maybe further on, I'll give you a couple of examples. But what else for you? What makes you mad?
No. It's fun because I'm thinking about I'm rewinding the tape on our entire relationship, and I'm thinking about the
I'm not
moments.
sending you secret messages here. That
I
would
know-
be manipulative.
I know.
I'm not doing it.
I know, but I'm just thinking about every moment I've made you angry, and I'm thinking about how you reacted. And there are moments where I just was like, oh wow, that happened quick. We went from 0 to 1,000 right then.
I've never been to 1,000 with. Are you crazy?
Listen to yourself right now.
1,000?
Listen to yourself.
I'm grinning ear to ear. Yeah, you have me on video. You know that I am grinning.
Yeah,
1,000?
just listen to yourself. Listen to yourself. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know.
No. Tell me about the 1,000. This is good. This is mirror to the soul. What did the 1,000 sound like? You have 100% carte blanche. I'm inviting it. I will not be frustrated with your evaluation.
Do you remember the time we were talking about that situation, and I said people that say that are cowards? Do you remember me saying this?
Yes, I remember how completely wrong you were.
Yes. And so when I say 1,000, I'm not talking about like your voice raised like it did just now when you were very, very sure how completely wrong I was. Just now, by the way. I'm not talking about what your voice did in situations like that where it goes real high pitched and you get all like old man on me. I'm talking about like you said, stop. Those are my friends. I forget exactly how you said it, but you pushed all of your chips to the center of the table, and you're like, this is a non-negotiable. You're going to retract that right now, and everything's moved to the center of the table. And I appreciated it. And I was like, you know what? That was a righteous anger moment. Like, what I said was absolutely wrong. You know, I used a very strong word. I said cowards about someone that Matt cares deeply about, and I was absolutely wrong. And he's right now, and I'm just going to admit it, mea culpa, and I'm going to retract that right now. You know what? I apologize for saying that. You're right. That word was very powerful, and I apologize for that. You remember this moment.
I remember exactly where I was standing, and I also remember thinking, this is a very new friendship. I wonder if there will still be one after this. I wonder if there will still be one after this. But
so you remember, you
always-
know that you pushed all the chips to the center of the table at that moment.
I did not. I didn't have time to calculate that.
It was very clear to me. It's like, okay, cool. This got hardcore really fast. So I feel like I am less likely to do that. Which is that a fair assessment of me? I don't know. Have I ever done that to you?
No. You're more strategic. I will deploy my reserves quicker than you will. I will see the opening that needs to be taken for this conversation to go where I think it needs to go and deploy the specialized troops to the front lines. You hold those things in reserve. Sometimes you never deploy them ever. You really pull back on your own reins. What I see you do is, okay, I've known a lot of people who are very calculating, and that is not usually a compliment. You are very calculating, but in this case, it is a compliment. You will evaluate and size up, and sometimes you'll grab data you're very sure of, but you misread it, but usually you read it right. And then you'll start kind of moving the chips around. But the thing that's so weird about how you do it is you never do it for your own benefit. You always move the pieces around in sneaky ways for the benefit of other people. That's just a very, very unique thing about you. And the thing that's funny is, I mean, you picked the example of a moment in our friendship when I have been, I don't remember being angry. I just remember kind of putting a heel in the ground on that point. But you picked the example that makes you look bad, even there. Probably ever. The other example makes me look bad, but you just made a mental.
So I was speaking to the President of the United States.
Wow.
It's very interesting. And as he turned to leave the room, it was me and a couple of other people there. He turns around and says, "Hey, what you're doing is important." And by what you're doing, of course, he's referring to encouraging people to vote, things of this nature. He said, "Because whoever gets my job after me is going to have the nuclear codes." I remember the look in his eyes when he said that. It was very interesting. But you know what I mean by nuclear codes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not just the kind of thing that you punch up and then nuclear weapons happen. It's like a double verification. In movies, you see some kind of switch, something like this. I mean, it's not easy to fire off a nuke, and that's on purpose.
Right. But I remember the look in his eyes when he said this. And it wasn't a political moment. It was different. It was like he had been standing in front of something that he had been guarding for a long time, and he was worried about what would happen. Like, what would happen in the event that, it could just happen whenever. It was almost like a father protecting a daughter, and he knew that he was about to step away from the daughter and she'd be unprotected. It's hard to explain. Is any of this resonating?
Yeah, I think I'm understanding, and I'm certainly resonating with the father's side of what you're saying, and I can see how somebody with that kind of power that they're withholding and trying to figure out how to manage would feel a certain burden with that, and I can see how they would be very concerned that whoever takes their place would not understand the burden.
Have you ever thought about launching a nuke? And I know many people are anti-nukes, and many people are pro-nuke. Have you ever thought about the decision that a human being has to make in order to execute the firing of a nuclear warhead?
Yes, I have, absolutely.
What kinds of things would you think about in that moment?
What? I thought about it because I read stuff about Harry Truman. You know, firing a nuke is a little different when you're talking about the technology we have now versus what was being dropped in the mid-1940s. But still, you know, if you do that, that people who have no stake in the thing, no business being harmed, are going to be harmed. And people are going to be harmed who aren't even alive yet. It's a monumental decision, and I don't want to have to make it myself.
It's an unbelievable burden. So I can't imagine the decision. But at the height of the Cold War, there was this guy that I want to tell you about. And
Okay.
this guy, his name is Roger Fisher. He was at Harvard Law School, and he was the guy that came up with something called the Harvard Negotiation Project. Have you ever heard of this?
No, I got nothing.
The Harvard Negotiation Project is something that was set up to analyze and study how people negotiate between each other and what it takes to get to yes, is what they say. There was actually a publication written called Getting to Yes, interest-based negotiation. Like, what is the other party interested in, and how can I give them that in order for us to go both ways?
Sure. Okay. That sounds thoughtful.
So this guy wrote a document way back in the day. It's in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. He wrote a document about a proposal for what should happen to prevent nuclear war. Because at the height of the Cold War, tensions were high. There was this new policy that was being laid out right before Reagan took office. It was a policy by Jimmy Carter. It was called Nuclear Deterrence Policy 59 or something like that.
Okay, sure.
Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with Carter doing work in that arena.
What do you know about that?
That he was interested in de-escalation, that he was interested in opening lines of communication, that he thought if there was some sort of easy and accessible way to communicate before making cataclysmic decisions, it would make things better. Carter was accused of a lot of naivete because of the let's just talk it out sort of stance that he tried to take on things that he tried to implement with policy. But I like a lot of what he thought.
There was actually a really weird, controversial thing that Carter did called the Presidential Directive 59, a nuclear weapons employment policy. And the thought was, instead of having large nuclear weapons that could be activated over large populated cities and things like that, it was a move towards strategic use of nuclear weapons in smaller areas. So take out a so-called military target and things like that.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, is this what we call like a tactical nuclear strike,
Pretty
where we're
much.
trying to reduce collateral damage. You just hit the thing you want disabled. But can't you do that without splitting the atom?
You couldn't at the time. Back in 1981, when these discussions were going on by Roger Fisher, this thing I'm about to tell you about that he wrote about in this bulletin, that's unbelievable. At that point in time, the Cold War was raging, and there was this new missile called the Pershing II that was being carted out into Germany, and the idea was they could put it in West Germany, and it could hit Moscow with precision. They could hit exactly what they wanted. And so this is the sort of thing that led towards the demise of the Cold War, or at least back in the day. But anyway, let's get back to Roger Fisher.
Okay.
So Roger Fisher was interested in how to de-escalate nuclear armed conflict. And he said there are many different ways that armed conflict comes about. And policymakers tend to focus on the machines involved, like the mechanisms, the things that are designed, the weapons themselves. He said, but there's another thing that could get you to armed conflict. And do you have any thoughts on what that might be?
Pride, painting yourself into a corner verbally. I mean, how do you or I get into conflict with somebody else? Sometimes it's because of a business deal or something mechanical, to liken it to the military terms. But more often it has to do with something that scrambles my normal sense of morality, my normal view that I normally carry around of other people as being valuable. And if I feel that pressure start to mount, I find myself kind of forgetting about those things in the moment, that kind of adrenaline rush, maybe we're going to have some real conflict here. And so the normal moral things that make me tick seem to not quite fire on all cylinders in that moment leading up to conflict. And so I would say there's a very human element to conflict as well. Hey buddy, what do you know off the top of your head about Amelia Earhart?
Not enough. I mean, I know she's a big deal. Like, I know she's this historical figure, but it's just like this hand-wavy part of my historical knowledge, to be honest.
Which is interesting because it overlaps with a lot of things that you were really into. But
Absolutely.
I have to admit, it's kind of a dark spot for me as well. I mean, she comes up, obviously, in history classes and all of that. But she's really interesting because she's an intersection of women's issues in the 20th century and celebrity culture and fascinating mystery and aviation mechanical history. There's just a lot to touch on there. And you know, this is Amy Lutz, the Keeper of Memories. This is her area of specialization, right?
Absolutely. Which is why I'm excited to talk to Amy about this right now. Amy, I'm so dang excited about today. I'm excited to learn about Amelia Earhart, and it's really fun just turning these recorders on and not having a clue about anything, and knowing that you are the guardian of memories,
Oh boy.
and you just have all this info.
I grew up in our hometown. This is kind of almost part of my upbringing.
Well, give me the rundown.
I grew up in Atchison, Kansas, which is Amelia Earhart's birthplace. My legal name is Amelia, and so in so many ways, I literally grew up in her shadow. But I actually did not really start studying her until grad school, in part because, you know, if you grow up in a small town and there's a particular figure or historical event that town is famous for, to be honest, you kind of get sick of it. Everything is named after that person. Hear about it all.
Catastrophic increase in shortages of essential medicines. Last year, new drug shortages were up by 30%, with 295 active drug shortages just by the end of 2022 alone. It's a mess. There's currently a shortage of at least 14 critical cancer drugs in the United States. They just can't get it. And every month of delay, cancer treatment increases the risk of death by at least 10%.
Guys, tonight I record everything with my glasses.
Statement by President Donald J. Trump. I am pleased to announce that former Congresswoman Lieutenant Colonel Tulsi Gabbard
I mean, I would describe it as God tier level trolling to just trigger a full-on China syndrome to own the libs and
Young man.
And so by the time I went to college, I was, kind of done. But when I went back into the research when I was in grad school, that was when I got a good sense of who she was, and to be honest, related to her as someone who grew up in the same town, actually went to the same college preparatory school, I found out during my research. About a month ago, we actually hit the anniversary of her birth. She was born at the end of July 24th, 1897. She had a little sister, and she was what most people would probably call a tomboy. She later called herself a restless type. She wrote in one of her books, she actually stayed with her grandparents in Atchison, Kansas for about 8 years or so collectively. It's this Victorian house that is sitting on the bluffs of the Missouri River. She wrote of her childhood when she said, "I'm sure I was a horrid little girl. I do not know how she, her grandmother, put up with me, even part-time. But she did." And she actually went to the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904, which is interesting to me because I'm about 3 miles away right now from where that used to be set up.
So she would have
And
seen
so
the
I
art
thought-
that, like, when it was first built.
Well, the arch wasn't built until the 60s.
Okay, never mind.
It's much more recent than you would think.
What were the big things about the 1904 fair? What's it known for?
There were balloons. They had this big kind of festival of nations. I mean, it's a World's Fair, so obviously you have different nations coming and representing their culture. We could do an entire episode of the St. Louis World's Fair. But what Amelia Earhart was drawn to was there was a roller coaster at the World's Fair in 1904. An old wooden roller coaster. But because she was, probably about 6 or 7, she was not allowed to ride it. And so she actually went home and started building her own roller coaster in her grandparents' backyard. And her mother, whose name is actually Amy, it's an interesting thing for me to talk about this. Her mother, Amy Otis Earhart, kind of said that she let her little girls just kind of go. She didn't want to bring them up as the stereotype of the time. She let them kind of run. And so Amelia built this roller coaster, and she actually flies off of it at one point, which she wasn't seriously injured or anything. But she told her little sister that it was just like flying. That's what it felt like to her. The Wright brothers' flight was in 1903, so that was only a year earlier. She didn't have the idea of flying an airplane at that point, but you can see some connections there. So like I said, we went to the same school for a short period of time. There's a college preparatory school in my hometown that has been there for years and years and decades, and she actually went there for a few years.
How has that not been renamed for her?
See, it's an interesting thing because I didn't know that we went to the same school until I started researching this. No one had ever told me that. I think part of the reason, however, is because when she went to an all-girls school. So about a few years before I went to this Catholic preparatory school, the school was put together. So there was a boys' school and a girls' school, and it was made co-ed a few years before I started. And so, I went to the same school. There's obviously a lineage, but it's named different. It's a different institution. It was co-ed when I went. It was all women when she went. So maybe that's the reason there's kind of been a break in the connection. But
if I ran that joint, I'd be slapping her name all over everything. Everything.
The town certainly does. Everything. Football stadiums, roads, bridges. You name it. But she was only in Atchison for a few years. Her grandfather, I think, was a retired judge. Her mom's family was fairly wealthy and actually ended up funding some of her early expeditions. But her father, unfortunately, was an alcoholic and spent, to be honest, most of their money on alcohol. And they end up, because he can't hold down a job, they end up moving around a lot, primarily around the Midwest when she's an adolescent. So they end up in Des Moines, Iowa in 1905 when she's, about 8. At a state fair, the Iowa State Fair in 1908, she saw her first airplane. That was the first time that she'd seen an airplane when she was about 11 or 12.
Okay, so
That was a
19,
Concord.
1908.
1908.
So that was 5 years after the Wright brothers' flight. So what kind of airplane do we know who did it and why it was there?
I don't know the type, but she did write about it. There might be records to go back, but she didn't mention what kind of airplane it was. However, she did say it was a thing of rusty wire and wood and not at all interesting. She actually thought it looked pretty dangerous, not well put together. She actually wasn't really impressed with it. But like you said, this is 5 years after the Wright brothers' flights. These are early airplanes. And even the airplane she disappeared on was still pretty early technology. So she was actually not very impressed, unfortunately, with airplanes at the beginning. But as the technology changes, as she starts to see more flights at different state fairs and things like that, she certainly becomes more impressed with it. Her family moves to Chicago around 1915. She, at this point, has no intention on going into any sort of aviation. She actually considered going into the medical field for a while, and that's in part because she actually served as a nurse's aide during the First World War and the Spanish flu. Spanish flu, of course, was 1918.
When you say in the First World War, did she go to the European front? I mean, was she in Europe or serving back home?
I don't believe so. I think she was helping out with people back home. She was in a military hospital of some sort.
Got it.
So obviously the First World War and the Spanish flu were going on basically at the same time. The First World War is wrapping up as the flu comes around. But around the same time, she was hospitalized for pneumonia, some sinus issues. She ends up having multiple sinus surgeries, actually, and has chronic sinus issues her whole life. It takes her about a year to recover, luckily. And after the First World War is over, she goes to New York, enrolls in Columbia, again, intending on maybe becoming a nurse or going into the medical field. But in about a year, she realizes that's not what she wants to do. She moves, I believe, with her family to Los Angeles about a year later. So this is still the early 1920s.
I've got this mental image. You just drew a map in my head. So she starts in Kansas, and she kind of arcs up and to the right in the country, and she hits New York, and then she immediately beelines all the way out to L.A. So it's like an arc up, and then she goes out to L.A. And so this is, like, in terms of her life, it's like early 20s, right?
Yeah, so 1920, she'd be about 23.
Okay. Got it.
She's moved around. Some of that was because of her father's situation, but when she gets older, she has adventures she wants to follow. She was, kind of as I mentioned earlier, she was a very adventurous young person. She always was kind of looking to the next thing, the next accomplishment. And so in 1920, she finally gets back to aviation. She takes a flight with the aviator Frank Hawks, who was a relatively famous aviator at the time. I don't know what plane it was, unfortunately. She never wrote about that either, but she was just like enthralled. The idea of flying and being up in an airplane was a really big deal. By the 1920s and 1930s, there's almost a cult around flying. People are obsessed with airplanes. They're obsessed with aviators. The number of flights I've been on is probably triple digits. I'm used to it. I don't think about it. But at this time, this was an enormous deal. I want to mention that now. I'll talk about how she plays into that, but I think that's important to keep in mind because you think about the stature that she had when she disappeared. I mean, it was a big deal to be an aviator, especially a female aviator.
This episode of No Dumb Questions is sponsored by HelloFresh. Matt, tell them the promo code for HelloFresh.
Yeah, let's get right to it. You can get $80 off your first month, including free shipping on your first box when you go to HelloFresh.com/80NDQ and then use the code 80NDQ at checkout, and there are additional restrictions and stuff.
HelloFresh is awesome. They ship ingredients to your house in a little box. It's got a little cooler in there. You got all the meat you need. If you order meat, there's also vegetarian options. It has everything in pre-measured ingredients and a really cool recipe card that you can just sit there and cook like you're some kind of crazy chef and you know what you're doing, even if you don't know what you're doing, because you're a smart person and you can follow instructions.
And if you can follow instructions, that means that you're making not chump food either. I can make chump food. I've always been able to do that, like microwave popcorn or mac and cheese or something. But they've got these gourmet recipes if you want to take it to the next level, like this balsamic fig sirloin. That's a thing. I've never thought of putting those words together, but it's a good idea. They're 60% cheaper than the average meal out, so you can get crazy good, legit, creative, artistic food that you make at a really good price.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a really good job making this sustainable, good for the environment. There's so much that's gone into thinking this through, and it works on an economic level, it works on a family level, on a food level. It's a really good thing, and they've got it figured out. And I must apologize, Matt. I don't have the promo code in front of me. You do, so I'm going to have to ask you.
Yep, here's how it works. You go to hellofresh.com/AMB. Use the promo code bucks off your first additional restrictions apply. You can visit hellofresh.com for more details.
Yeah, thank you very much for supporting the sponsors. When you do that, you're supporting the podcast. We really appreciate it. It's awesome. HelloFresh has changed our lives as a family. It's going to change your life too. Just give it a shot. I think you'll find the same is true for you.
The feedback from everybody who sits in the third chair and has tried this out has been crazy positive, and I'm not surprised. But in addition to the positive thing being that the food is good and it's affordable and it's incredibly convenient and you can turn it on and off whenever you want, is that it actually makes Earth better, because this is the more sustainable option in terms of how to do food that you make at home, according to a study they did at the University of Michigan. And it makes Earth better because they keep giving away free meals. They did 2.5 million last year, and they're saying they're going to be able to do even more this year, which in a year like this is really needed and a really big help. So you get to help make that happen also.
That's awesome. Let's get back to learning about Amelia Earhart.
Game on. Was Frank Hawks already famous when she met him?
Relatively. He didn't ever quite get the stature of someone like George Lindbergh, but
I'm sorry.
originally.
I don't know who this person is.
He was the guy.
Frank Hawks.
Visually, he's sort of the forerunner to the style of what an aviator and a hot shot looks like. That's who I'm picturing.
Yeah.
At least.
How I got my van from this to
I
this.
believe so.
Yes, we roller paint and all that.
Sounds like my understanding of him as well. So yeah, he was an early, pretty well known. I think he might have had his own airfield at the time out in California. So she takes flight with him. She's obsessed. Within a few years, I'm not entirely sure what year it is, but she saves up about $1,000 for flying lessons. And she actually enrolls with Anita Snooks, who she went by Netta, who was one of the first female pilots. She was actually the first woman to run her own aviation business and own a commercial airfield. So Amelia Earhart was really into that. She wanted to learn from probably one of the best female pilots, if not the best. And to get there, actually, she ends up, she takes her $1,000 with her. Some of that she got from her parents. Some of it she had a part-time job at a telephone company, and she saved some money. So she gets on a bus and takes the bus to the end of the line. This is somewhere in California, I think near Los Angeles. And then she walks 4 miles to the airfield without telling Netta Snooks that she was going to be there. So she just basically walks up to her on the airfield and says, "Hi, can you give me flying lessons? I have money." And she does. And that's how she starts to learn to fly over the course of a couple years. In 1923, with some money from her parents, with some savings, she acquired her pilot's license. She was only, I think, the 16th woman to do so. She was only the 16th woman to get a pilot's license in the United States. She buys her first airplane.
Whoa. Matt, I don't know if you knew this. Amy, I know you haven't met my wife, Tara, but she's actually taking flying lessons now. And this was her idea.
Really?
Yeah, she said, I'm going, we're talking about getting back to school. And I was like, we're just talking about life in general. And she said, you know what? I'm going to go learn how to fly. I was like, really?
That's awesome.
She's like, yeah. Because years ago, I went through a big stretch of time where I did a lot of flying lessons, helicopters, airplanes, everything. And she went with us on a couple of flights. And she's just like, hey, I'm going to do it. I never actually got the license. All I have to do is the written exam. So I need to go do that now. But I can't do it now because
No, she's doing it.
Yeah, she's doing it, and I can't get in the way because she's very, very smart. But it's really fun because Did you ever hunt as a kid?
Nope. Only fish.
Never. You've never killed an animal.
No, I've killed an animal. I killed a hamster one time on accident with a nail in the ceiling.
What is that the hamster
I
you threw at
accidentally
the ceiling
killed
on
a-
accident?
Dude, I didn't mean to do. I was sick about
Tell
that
me-
for ages. I wept.
Tell me again. I forget the story.
I really didn't know this is where we were going. Sure.
We weren't going here, but I just forgot. Something
This is-
about.
No, this is my entire hunting history right here. We had a hamster. I loved the hamster. It was my brother's hamster, and my buddy and I, when we were in high school, I guess, we would play with
What's
the
the
hamster.
name of the hamster?
It didn't have a name.
What's the
And
name
I
of
remember.
the hamster?
And
Make a
I
name up
wouldn't-
right now. I need an emotional connection to this hamster.
If I killed a hamster, what name would I least want it to have?
Right.
I think the correct answer is Randall. Okay, so it's Randall. Sure.
Randy.
So we would
Randy
do
the
this thing
hamster.
where we would make like one of those terror dome bowls that you can ride your motorcycles in real fast. And so we'd use this white sheet on a queen size bed. And we'd lift up the four corners, and then we kind of rock it back and forth very gently. And the hamster would run around in there, and you could pull it just a little
I
bit
see where
tight.
this is going.
And the hamster would hop up and do a tiny little flip. And I don't know what happened, but without any kind of communication, maybe it was just like a musk or a scent or something, we both got it in our heads that we should pull it a little bit tighter at the same time. And it was down in the basement, and the ceilings were low, and I had built a model of the solar system that I had since taken down, and it was suspended from the ceiling by fishing line and little finishing nails that were stuck into the foam ceiling. But I'd never taken out the nails, and that hamster, it must have just caught one of the nails. We snapped it way too hard, and the hamster went up in the air. It caught one of the nails, and it landed down on the white sheet, and there was this perfect little scarlet droplet of blood next to it.
Oh, it didn't stick to the ceiling?
It slid off. There was a moment of hesitation, which is the moment you knew there was death. It wasn't like the clean boom and back down. There was a moment of hesitation at the high point in its flight, which caused me to
It
know,
stopped rotating. Like it was rotating like wee, like hamster rotating. And then it stopped rotating.
of my life. Oh.
I'm sorry that happened to you, man. That's traumatizing.
I didn't know what to do, and so I flushed it down the toilet, but then I clogged the toilet. And
No,
I had
you
to
didn't.
I did. I had to repeatedly, vigorously flush and plunge to get the thing down, and I'm upset, and I'm kind of weepy, and then I wasn't totally honest with my parents about it until much, much later in life, if ever. Have I told them yet? I don't know. I killed the hamster.
Oh.
We blamed it on the cat.
Randall, I'm so sorry that happened, dude. I mean, we're joking, but that was. How old were you?
Oh, I was maybe 15, something like that. And that sounds like old enough to know better, but it was crushing for me. I really like animals, and I had already killed an animal as a little kid. Because remember, I suffocated the kitten. I told you that story.
No.
Oh my goodness, really? These are my hunts. Like I get together with hunters, and we're around a campfire, and they're like, "I saw that elk at 300 yards. I had its side just put right in the heart. And then I had to fend off a bear." I'm like, when I was 5, we got a kitten, and I put it in a Shackley container for malt mix, and I closed the lid, and I thought it would be his little kitten house, and then he quit moving, and I didn't understand because I suffocated the kitten on accident, and then I cried
Dude,
a lot.
I did not
and one
know
time I killed
this.
a hamster. These are enormously formative experiences for me in terms of my relationship with animals. I honestly think it's part of why I don't want to kill fish. I want to catch them and say nice things to them and put them back in nature and not eat them.
That's a big deal, man. When I was a kid, I had a very different relationship with animals. Living in the South, a lot of friends would go, we call it hunting. I almost said hunting to you
Hunting.
because I try to do the chameleon voice
Or
thing.
hunting.
I'm just going to talk like a
You go hunting?
Yeah,
Go hunting? Go
everybody
hunt-
would go hunting.
Go on hunting.
And so my buddy and I, we lived next to a wildlife refuge. And during a certain period of time during the year, you could go hunting out there. And we had Ruger 1022s. And back in the day,
Wait.
there was this
For
little-
the uninitiated, what is that?
Okay, so a Ruger 1022 is a 22 rifle. It's basically the standard rifle in America. It's usually your first semi-automatic 22 caliber rifle.
A 22 caliber, what would you liken the size of that the actual projectile? What would you liken the size to?
So imagine a pencil eraser, just a little bit smaller than a pencil eraser, and the cartridge is a rimfire, meaning you don't have a firing pin that hits the center of the bullet in the back in the primer. It actually taps the side of the cartridge, and that makes it fire. So that when you fire a rimfire cartridge, you can see a little tab mark on it. So that's how it works. And so it's the cheapest rifle to shoot.
No
So
meaningful kickback, just makes a little pop. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's what everybody uses when they're teaching a child how to shoot a rifle for the first time, and they want them to experience the bang, but not necessarily feel a need to kick. It's what you use as a kid. And so as a 14-year-old boy in Alabama, I mean, it was not a big deal to get the rifle out of the gun case. Hey, Dad, I'm going to go out with my buddy Coulter and we're going to go squirrel hunt. Sure thing, no big deal, buddy. And so we'd go. And so there's this whole thing of learning how to use a rifle and making sure that you're responsible. It's a pretty big deal because the stakes are high, and if you mess up, somebody could get hurt. And so it's a formative moment for a young boy, a young girl down here to learn on a rifle. And so I've done this with all my children. And so I remember specifically one day we went out to squirrel hunt. And the way you do it is there's a lot of things. Like if you and another person are out squirrel hunting, it works best if you have one person with a rifle and one person with a shotgun. And so if the squirrel's on the run, use the shotgun. If he's posted up on the tree, use the rifle.
I'm sorry, I got to ask one more question. For the uninitiated, why would one be advantageous over the other if the animal's on the run?
So a shotgun has a spread pattern. It's like a bunch of really small shot, and when you pull the trigger, it spreads out. And so depending on the size of the shot you use, you can have let's say the shot will hit a 2-foot diameter area versus a rifle which will hit a spot the size of a pencil eraser. So what you want to do is, if the squirrel's not moving, you want to use the rifle, and you want to shoot just behind his ear. That's the ideal place to hit because you can take out the head, the squirrel feels no pain, and you preserve all the meat. You cook the squirrel and eat it. That's hunting. And so we went out one day, and Coulter and I had Ruger 1022s, and we found a squirrel on the run. And we had recently acquired from a sportsman's catalog a crank. Now the way this works is you bolt it on the trigger guard of your rifle and you crank it backwards. And so you kind of like hold the rifle up, and then instead of pulling the trigger, you hold this crank and you just rotate it. And it was a cam, and it would pull the trigger 3 times for every time you turn the crank once. That's pretty awesome.
Oh.
Yeah. For a 14-year-old kid, that is amazing. We did all kinds of weird things. And so we went hunting one day, and there was a squirrel that started running up the tree. We didn't have a shotgun. And so typically, you wait till the squirrel stops. If he stops on the other side of the tree, your partner that was hunting with you would walk to the other side of the tree, and when you walk over there, the squirrel would, go to the other side of the tree, which is where your partner is, and the partner would shoot him.
Obviously not in line with the shot, but just enough to move the squirrel.
Well, I mean, it's up in a tree, so it doesn't really matter. So you're shooting on opposite sides of the tree, but you're shooting up. One day, we're doing this, and a squirrel's on the run up a pine tree. And typically we would wait, but for some reason this day, Coulter didn't stop. He didn't wait. He just started cranking. And this crank device that we were trying out for the first time was throwing up little bitty puffs of pine bark behind the squirrel as it was running around the tree. And finally, I was like, "What's happening, dude? What are you doing?" And he couldn't hear me because it was like tat 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 tat. And I was just like, "What is going on?" And all of a sudden, the squirrel fell down at the base of the tree. I was like, "Dude, you got it! You hit a squirrel on the run with a rifle. Granted, it was barely semi-automatic. It was closer to a Gatling gun style, but you got it. And that's a hard shot." And so I went over to pull the squirrel up, and I kid you not, man, it was the perfect shot on a squirrel. It looked like you took a spoon and you kind of scooped the top of the squirrel's brains out, which is it was right behind the ear, and then it just kind of like the squirrel felt no pain whatsoever, and we took it home and ate it, and it was like, wow, that was the best shot that ever happened. Never happened again. But,
Is that the best shot you've ever seen?
No, I don't know what the best shot I've ever seen is, but that was a very interesting shot. Also.
But come on, in terms of circumstances, I'm sure you've seen something longer, but in terms of circumstances, what you're describing is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know, man. There's so much that happened in my childhood. We had respect for animals, and we understood that this is a life. And if you take this life, you consume the animal. That's just what you do. Kill what you eat. That's just what you do.
And the difference, ethically, for me, that doesn't scar me at all, and I wouldn't have been troubled by that as a kid. The difference is, I really did not want to take the life of my pet hamster or little pet kitten that I had as a kid. So the difference between scarring and not scarring is that wasn't hunting, it wasn't food, it was
Right.
an accident. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're doing, that's knowing how to survive and function, and an age-old right of humanity.
We had this other thing that happened one time. One of our neighbors farmed emus. Do you remember when the emu meat was going to be the meat of the future? Do you remember this?
I do. Yeah, now it's only really comes up in those Liberty Mutual ads.
So anyway, imagine just like 30 emus in a pen. It's like a fenced-in area that's like, I don't know, 50 yards by 50 yards. 50 emus. The neighbor was like, hey, here's the deal. I am losing money on emus because the slaughterhouse won't take them. The original magic beans I was sold was that, hey, emu, the meat of the future, just buy this emu feed, raise the emu, you can sell the oil, you can also sell the meat, it's just going to be great. Well, when the slaughterhouse quit taking the emus, this guy was losing money, and he's like, hey, here's the deal. I got to get rid of these things. And we said, can we go shoot one and eat it? He's like, yeah, go for it. He said, well, how do you want us to kill it? He goes, I don't know, grab a rifle, just go do it. I'm like, okay. And so,
wait, how old were you?
This was probably 14. I mean, I did a lot of things with a rifle when I was 14 years old.
Cool, all right.
And so we went out, and we're like, okay, emus are expensive. We're going to eat an emu. And we're going to figure out how to dress it. We're going to do all the stuff. But it comes down to somebody's got to shoot the emu. And you're walking up to this pen of emus, probably 50 of them, and you have a 22 rifle, and you're a 14-year-old boy. And you see all these heads bobbing around on these long necks. That is like the ideal rifle shot for a young man. This is what I trained for the 3 years I've been able to shoot a rifle. Is this one clean shot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, well, who gets to shoot it? I mean, obviously, we're good enough with a rifle because we shoot all the time that we're going to kill it in one shot, obviously. So who gets to shoot? I don't know. I guess the thing to do is paper, rock, scissors. We said, okay, we'll do paper, rock, scissors, but the person that shoots it has to do it left-handed. So, okay, cool. So we did paper, rock, scissors, and I won. I was like, yes, this is great. Which one do we want? And so we're like trying to pick out the emu. We find the one. That's the one. And so a way an emu walks is, it's kind of like if you had a wheel and you had I don't know how to describe it other than, like, imagine you painted like one spot on the outer perimeter of the wheel. And you know that it goes fast over the top of the wheel and then it stops at the bottom momentarily where the wheel makes contact with the ground. Okay? So the velocity of the spot on the edge of the wheel is 2x the speed of the car when it's on top of the wheel, and it's 0 when it's at the bottom of the car, right? When it's hitting the ground. You with me?
Yes.
An emu kind of walks the same way. It kind of bobs forward very fast, and then the head will stay stationary in one spot, and then it'll bob forward fast, and it does it over and over and over.
It's like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
Yeah, kind of.
It's like what they used to, they used to paint like 4 legs, and they just spin it in the background, and then Boo Boo or Yogi Bear would run real fast.
No. Well, I'm talking about the head of the. Like, have you ever seen a chicken or a bird walk? They bob their head when they walk.
Yeah, I saw your video.
Yeah, and so it has to do with the vestibulo-ocular reflex of the bird. Like a bird, they move their head into position, and then they walk under it. And then they move their head into position and walk under it. And that's because they're taking optical cues from around them. I think dinosaurs may have done that, actually. I don't know, but it's possible.
Yes, they do, don't they? How about that?
I don't know. That's just...
And yes, if you're wondering if I'm doing that with my left hand, and I even formed my hand in the shape of a bird head, yes, you're right, I did. And I am. And I'm still doing it.
And it's an ideal... Isn't that an ideal 22 target? That head bobbing over?
Wow, yes.
Yeah, it is. It's great. So anyway, I got to go first. And so I teed up. I leaned on a fence post, left-handed shot, had a scope, found the one, bob, took a shot. What happened? What happened next was awful. Feathers flew up on top of the head. I just skinned it on top of the head, and feathers went straight up, and I didn't even hurt the thing. And now the whole mess of emus went crazy, and we were trying to figure out which one that I nicked. I handed the rifle off, and I'm like, dude, go right-handed, man. We gotta end it. I don't know if I nicked it or hurt it or what happened. And so we found it. I'm doing the spotting thing. I call it out. He finds it. Boom, shot. Emu's on the ground. Okay, so then we open up the pen. We run into the pen, and the emu's flopping around on the ground. It's dead or dying, but it wasn't completely, it didn't all the way die. And I don't know if you've ever been...
So is this the chicken thing? Is this just the nervous system still working things out?
That's what it felt like.
Or is it in the death throes.
I don't know. But have you ever seen how big an emu is?
Yeah, I have.
So imagine a chicken flopping around. Only multiply that times 20 times. That's how big this thing is. And it's dying.
With dinosaur legs.
Yeah. With big old talons on it. And talons. And this thing is like, well, we get too close, that thing will kill us. It'll gut us, right? And so we're sitting there doing all the math, trying to figure out how to end this thing humanely. And we eventually got it figured out. But it was a very formative moment. And then we got done, and we're all breathing hard, and we're like, man, and we had to go skin it and get the meat. It was just a really big deal. And we had a better appreciation for where our food came from.
Yeah, well, I would think so. How did it affect you in terms of hunting and shooting and all of that kind of stuff?
I mean, this was before I shot my first deer, my only deer. I've only killed one deer ever, which I did with a 30-30 rifle. And so I was hunting on a bucket, and I was sitting there, and really good with a rifle. And this doe comes out. There's 3 does together. They didn't seem to be fawns or anything. It was 3 full-grown does. I picked the one out. I took the shot, dropped it, and I ran over to it, and it was dead. Fell over instantly. And then had to go through the process of skinning that and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it was just, you just thought a lot about where food came from. It occurred to me that my son, growing up now, has never had anything remotely like that. We've done dove hunting before and all that kind of stuff, but we've done some squirrel hunting, but he's never killed a deer. Did you ever hunt as a kid?
Nope. Only fish.
Never. You've never killed an animal.
No, I've killed an animal. I killed a hamster one time on accident with a nail in the ceiling.
What is that hamster you threw at the ceiling on accident?
I didn't mean to do. I was sick about
Tell
that
me-
for ages. I wept.
Tell me again. I forget the story.
I really didn't know this is where we were going. Sure.
We weren't going here, but I just forgot.
No, this is my entire hunting history right here. We had a hamster. I loved the hamster. It was my brother's hamster, and my buddy and I, when we were in high school, I guess, we would play with
What's the name of the hamster?
It didn't have a name that I remember. And
Make a name up right now. I need an emotional connection to this hamster.
If I killed a hamster, what name would I least want it to have?
Right. Hey, this is No Dumb Questions. I am Destin, and I'm joined by Matt Whitman. Hey. All right, so last time what we did here on No Dumb Questions is we played songs for each other towards the end of the episode. And Matt, you said there was one particular song that you wanted to use to introduce this episode to get us into today's topic, which is about social misinformation and a particular documentary that we watched together.
Yeah, just social media in general, what it means and the consequences and all of that business. But yeah, the last song on the playlist is one by a group called Cheap Cuts. I've never heard of them. This has vocals from Pete Wentz of Fall Out Boy, and I just want to play this for you, and then I want to get your really honest, immediate, visceral reaction. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Go.
Cheap Cuts. Wake up, check your phone. Know the alarm. You're still alone. Wake up, rewind the night. Who are you? But also kind of who am I? Wake up, check your phone. Tea party for the apocalypse. Don't forget to RSVP. Think about how the polar bears are running out of ice. But hey, this photo got a lot of likes. Get down, but don't feel down. This is why we can't have nice things like a clean car or world peace. So the sleep from your eyes. Suicide, survive. Wake up, check your phone. Wake up, check your phone. Smoke.
Yeah. Okay, I see what's going on here.
Check your phone. Check your phone.
Okay, you're getting the gist.
Yeah, I'm getting the gist. It kind of feels like Cake, by the way, which is a great band that I love.
Which is why I really wanted to play it for you in part, just because musically, I knew you'd dig it, the whole Cake plus Fat Boy Slim kind of feel.
Yeah, it feels good. But it's also very sad, because it's true. The whole check your phone I literally picked up my phone just now. I didn't mean to, but I picked up my phone because you said the word phone, and I was checking to see if there was any notifications on it. I think I'm addicted to my phone, man. I don't want to be. This is a thing that I want to break free of, But that really leads us into this documentary that we want to talk about today. It's called The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix, and I watched it. You watched it as well, right?
I did, carefully and soberly. It was heavy, a heavy watch.
I'm particularly interested in this because I did a whole series on disinformation and misinformation on social media. I started that about a year ago, and I realized that it was a really important moment in history because I think people are about to start understanding that we are being, I don't know what the word is you want to say, we're being influenced in ways that are bad.
We're being recoded. We're being changed as a species by this thing that both you and I participate in readily. And part of what I like about the way this song goes down as you listen to it is that it uses whimsy and cleverness and lightness, and there's this juxtaposition between all this joy and horns and hey, hands in the air, party time.
Check your phone.
Deep, abiding loneliness and sadness that comes with a life where your phone rocks you to sleep, and your phone is the first thing you fumble for when there's still sleep in your eyes in the morning. Like, why? What do we think is going to be on the other end of the thing? But at least here, it's got this sweet goofiness that, I'll say it again, makes it go down a little bit easier, whereas this documentary we're about to talk about, it's a tough watch. There's no goofing around in it.
You know what this kind of reminds me of? Like the feel of the whole thing? You remember one of the first episodes we did on this podcast? We talked about the short story by Ray Bradbury called The Veldt. Remember that?
Well, yeah, that's where I just threw that phrase, every night they rock us to sleep.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's what you were
from
doing.
the Dead Mouse song that is called The Veldt, remember?
Yeah, I do.
And every night they rock us to sleep, so
Yep.
in love with the way we are, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So cool. This is going to be a super interesting topic. Let's do it. Let's learn about the social dilemma. It's directed by a guy named Jeff Orlowski. Orlowski. I don't know how to say that. Orlowski.
I feel Orlowski.
Orlowski? Yeah, okay. So it's an amazing, I don't know if I would call it a documentary because there's this parallel like storyline that's going with it. It's a really interesting way. It's like a through line of this side plot. I highly recommend it. So I also recommend watching it with your family. Do you recommend that?
Yeah, even if you're the kind of family that really, really cares about the family-friendly thing, I think you get shit once, and otherwise, I don't think it has swears beyond that.
Yeah, and that was from a U.S. senator.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, in a hearing.
Tester from Montana, who seems like a pretty cool dude, by the way.
Yeah, go Montana. I like that part. Yeah, I like the way you're describing it because it is a documentary, and it very much has that feel. It's beautifully shot. I mean, it's wonderful execution. But the parallel story is, what would you call it? It's not a dramatization. It's a hypothetical American family, and they do a good job of making you empathize with actual humans and actual characters who are interacting with some of the problems the documentary is describing in a way that I'm guessing for most families would look pretty familiar.
Can I just top level it real quick? So so the whole point of the documentary is the premise that social media, as we view it today, is not what's actually happening. We kind of think social media is the way that we can share things with our friends, share these pictures or this thought or opinion that I have with these other people, or just argue with people. But the premise of the whole documentary is that social media is fundamentally changing the fabric of society in a really big way. And the guardrails are kind of off this whole situation, and it's running out of control. And what's so fascinating about how they did this is they got former executives and engineers and things like that from these companies. And the reason I found this so interesting is I tried to do something like this in Smarter Every Day, except I went to the companies. Like, I went into the doors of these companies, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. And I spoke with people that were in charge of fighting or combating misinformation and disinformation. What's so interesting about this documentary is they took a different angle. They got people that had left these companies and asked them what they thought about what was going on the inside. Now, I have no way of knowing if these are people that left under good terms or bad terms. A lot of these people say, well, I have, negative thoughts about what I did when I was there, but we have no idea of knowing if they left on good terms or if they...
Right, maybe leaving on good terms would be a strike against their credibility.
Yeah.
circumstances, maybe leaving on bad terms would be a strike against that fact. It's moot unless what they were all saying is factually inaccurate, which it didn't strike me that way. But assuming they're telling the truth, I guess I don't really care whether or not they're wrong.
That's a good point. That's an excellent point. Yeah, but my point was just trying to compare and contrast with what I did on the misinformation series on Smarter Every Day, because my point was external manipulation. And the first reason was people that were trying to manipulate YouTube. This is what I studied. People that were trying to manipulate YouTube for financial gain. And the other thing is people that are trying to influence others, whether it be about politics or about hating your brother or your sister online, all that sort of stuff. But external factors like state-sponsored manipulation of social media, that sort of thing. So I found this to be very different than that. It kind of weighted over about the 2/3 mark. It weighted over into the kind of stuff that I studied earlier. But I just found it to be fascinating. Very, very well done.
Yeah. What were the primary emotions you felt as you watched them? Non-logic emotions. Visceral. What did you feel?
I felt like a person on a sinking ship that knew there were holes in the ship. And I have a bucket. And I'm starting to try to bail water out of the sinking ship. And everybody else has a bucket, but nobody wants to help me because they're too busy, like, looking at the fish or something.
They're just chopped liver over here. I mean, come on, man. Like, somebody has a bucket.
You just asked me what I feel like, and this is what I feel like. So,
Okay. Well, then you can't be wrong.
well, I mean, what the heck? You asked me a question. You asked for my emotions, and I'm giving you my emotions.
Ribbing you. You're good. You're good. I got to be careful getting you into emotions. It's weird.
Yeah, and I feel like everybody in this documentary felt like that as well. They're like, hey, this is happening. It's kind of like Chicken Little, like, hey, the sky is falling, only the sky is actually falling.
Yeah.
I see it to be true. I mean, very, very intelligent people that I know, like hyper intelligent people that I leave my children with. They've said, hey, have you heard about all this Bill Gates stuff and the vaccines? And, well, yeah, what stuff? Is he working on some stuff? No, he's trying to blah, 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 and it's clearly misinformation. Like, 100% clearly misinformation.
Ideas that wouldn't even make sense for anyone, wouldn't
No.
have any upside or benefit to Bill Gates or anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know the kind of rumors you're talking about.
And then I kind of look at a person, I'm like, wait, what? Are you, what? And I've tried to do several different tactics. First is like, where did you hear that information? Full disclosure here, I work with the Pointer Institute on something called MediaWise. I am a, quote, ambassador for this MediaWise program. And so part of that is I try to help educate the youth of today and other people about misinformation online. Think before you click. Did the person that put this in front of you have any reason or anything to gain by doing that? Is all these types of things. Check the source. Trying to teach people basically media literacy, which is not taught in schools today. By the way, I have a vested interest for my children. I want my children to live in a world where there is truth and you can figure out what is right and wrong by going to the internet. But right now, the signal to noise ratio on the internet is so bad. If I want to know truth, instead of going to Google it and trying to find it, I was doing this today. I wanted to know where rockets are launched in Russia. And I know Baikonur is one, Star City. They launch rockets from there. And I know that the orbital inclination of the International Space Station is 51.6 degrees because they want to avoid the border of China. But I also know there's other places that they launch rockets in Russia. But I have no idea what they are. And I chose to contact a human and ask a human because I trust what they can tell me better than what I can Google. Makes sense?
What's the number one thing you're hearing from people right now as they try to make sense of the COVID-19 information? What's the number one complaint you hear from people, regardless of where they get it?
Nobody knows that. Nobody knows what's going on.
That's what I hear. It doesn't matter in my pockets. Everybody says the same thing. Feels like everybody's lying. I don't know what's real, what's not. That's really troubling. And I think in the documentary, they use the phrase that some of the we're past the information age, and
It makes me feel unsteady, and if I don't have an agreed upon set of facts or parameters, it's very difficult to process anything with people who don't happen to already embrace the same parameters I do coming into the conversation. I guess it just wasn't very hard to see where the breakdown is occurring as the story unfolds.
Do you know what Eternal September is? Have you ever heard the phrase Eternal September?
Nope.
Have you ever heard about Usenet? Do you know what Usenet is?
It rings a bell, but I don't want to trumpet my ignorance. Bring me up to speed.
So in the early internet, there was this whole series of bulletin board systems where you could go on and you could communicate with people. And Usenet, I was an early user of the internet, and I remember some amazing forums online. And everyone in there was a person of goodwill. It was just text-based. You can go find things that I wrote from way, way, way back in the day. It's interesting because the internet was all about learning things from other people back in the day. And then as people gather, more people, more money gathers, then the attraction of that particular town square grows. Once you can make money off the thing, it gets interesting for many different reasons. It's no longer about, oh, I'm just trying to find out how to repair this little waffle maker. You can figure out how to gain power like that. And then the sin that's in every human heart, I believe, comes to bear on these new technologies that you can connect people with, and amazing things happen. And amazing things don't have to be good. Eternal September, by the way, is in 1993, September of 1993. That's when the people that made America Online, they started offering Usenet access to everybody on AOL. What would happen is, if you were on one of these forums, as you came in, you would learn the slang, and you would learn how that culture of that particular bulletin board or whatever worked, and you would have this lingo, and you slowly started to get it, and you're like, oh, cool. But in September of 1993, everybody got dumped on Usenet at the exact same time. It's the equivalent of, everybody running into a subreddit today, and if a subreddit front pages or something, it gets really bad really fast. And that's because the people that are coming in at such a rate that they don't have time to learn the culture.
Yeah, we had that happen with a basketball game we ran for. It had a great culture, rotation of maybe 15 to 20 people who would show up. You'd have a dozen to 15 on a good night. Everybody knew what was and wasn't cool, what's a foul, what's not, how hard do you go. And then we invited a couple people, and they invited a couple people, and all of a sudden the circle grew to 30 in a couple of weeks. And they didn't know the culture. And so the culture got reset, and the thing that made the game awesome in the first place was destroyed literally in 2 weeks worth of play. And it was over. You couldn't get it back.
That's a wonderful analogy. That's amazing. What's so interesting about that is, in basketball, there are rules. This is unacceptable. That's a foul, and we all know it. Or, that's ticky-tack. We're not going to call that.
Exactly.
And so it literally stops the game when people don't behave correctly.
Yeah.
That was Eternal September, and so that's when...
I still don't understand. Eternal September just refers to the moment where AOL dumped everyone on the Usenet.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that was the moment that it all stopped. The influx of users, it just changed everything. And so that was it. After that, nobody could get it back. You know what? I'm going to Google and see if So I used to hang out in this one forum called alt.fan.cecil.adams. alt.fan.cecil.adams. So Cecil Adams was this fictitious guy that wrote this column called The Straight Dope. I used to hang out in there, and I would learn so much stuff. The Straight Dope used to be a series of books. And alt.fan.cecil.adams, which is a really weird name, but that's where people would go and hang out and try to learn all these really interesting things. Everything changed once it got big. I still remember I went to a Surfing the Net competition when I was in high school. I won because it was the year that Google came out. And I found out about Google before everyone else. I used to use a service called Alta Vista. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah. Okay, this is ringing a bell. You mentioned something about this.
Yeah, so Alta Vista was this old search engine. Looks like it's been purchased by Yahoo now. And that used to be the best way to search the internet. After that, everything changed when Google hit the scene. And I still remember sitting in a business class at university around the 1999, no, it was 2000 time frame. And I remember the economics professor, the microeconomics professor, are saying, hey, these search engines that you're using for free, at some point you're going to have to start paying money for these because the market just doesn't make sense. And that's because a new market was emerging that the professor didn't understand, and that was the market of people's attention.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm rambling, dude. I'm sorry. Keep going. I have really deep thoughts and feelings about all this, but we got to
I
get
knew
this.
we were going to have a tough time dissecting this, and that's part of the beauty of the program is what an orderly job they did of breaking down such a wild network of ideas. I'm not surprised at all that we've shot down multiple different trails a little bit. Let me just try to reset it. This is how the social dilemma struck me. We watched this social dilemma program. You watched it, I watched it. We talk about this offline all the time. The climate of the internet, social media, phone addiction, how apps work. We talk about this constantly. What we do as parents with phones and social media. We both effectively, as much as I don't like to admit it, we both work on social media. We're in the middleman business, right? We don't design this stuff.
I'm addicted. I will say it. I'm addicted to my phone. Just say it.
Yeah, that's a problem because you don't want to be addicted to anything, right?
I do not. Okay, here's what I'm doing. I am literally making a list of things we're going to talk about in this because if we don't put some guardrails on this, we're just okay. So phone addiction is number one. What else should we talk about?
All right, but let me just keep top level. I think the reason you and I wanted to talk about the social dilemma was not because here was another blunderbuss, scattershot. Here's a bunch of opinions about things that we don't like about this little element of the internet or that little element of the internet. The reason that it affected me and I think you is because it was so targeted. It took you on such a clear journey of here's the problem. Why do you think that problem is? And then nobody can answer it in the intro to the show. And then they start exploring how the problem manifests right alongside the question of why the problem is manifesting. And one of the things that is so tricky about the whole question, I thought the social dilemma did really well, is even getting your finger on what question to ask. What is social media? What is going on with all of this? Why is it problematic? How is it affecting people? Is it even problematic? Everybody feels weird. The whole thing feels off. Everyone is rightly suspicious and knows this probably isn't good for us. But this is the first thing I've seen that did a great job putting those guardrails on you just described and walking you from point A to point Z. Here's how the problem happened. Here's how it's affecting people. And then unfortunately, I think the thinnest part of the documentary is here's what we do about it. I don't feel like they had really any good constructive proposals. So what if we follow their outline and take another run at succinctly articulating what the problem is? What is repeating the social dilemma's take on what the problem is? And then what if after that we talk about how that happened? And after that, what if we talk about what that looks like for humans like you? What do you think about that process?
So, what is the problem? How that happens, you said? Okay, I don't understand what you mean by that, but I've typed it out. And then I'm going to say how we respond. And then under that, I'm going to put phone addiction. And then I'm going to put destined for failure.
Okay, I would say, what's the problem? How did it happen? I think the next question is how does it manifest? And that's where the phone addiction conversation fits in. And then we talk constructive proposals.
Okay, cool. How does it manifest?
Okay, so what is the problem? Kick shot at.
The problem is we don't know what truth is, and we are indirectly told what to think by what media is put in front of us.
Okay, I would say yes, that's an accurate description of what they're saying in reality. I would add to that that the problem is that humans and our attention is commodified by not even humans, by algorithms, by systems that are beyond humans, that are specifically built with the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of our OS, our personalities, our humanity in mind, to exploit that for attention, to tap into our insecurities, our weaknesses, our distractedness, our anger, our fear, to keep us coming back. It's kind of like the thumbs up or thumbs down. It doesn't really matter on YouTube either way. It's an engagement. You know, that was always what I was saying about it. It's kind of the same thing. It doesn't matter how the click happens. Just there must be eyeballs. There must be clicks. And if you can exploit joy or warmth or happiness to do it, fine. If it's easier to accomplish that by exploiting anger, rage, fear, fine. We just need to that's how the systems were built, and now you throw 10, 15 years of evolution over the top of it, and the systems are very, very good, but according to the show, we haven't evolved in that time. Our brains haven't changed. I'm the same species, I'm the same thing that I was in 1995, but my dance partner, the internet, has evolved a billion times over, and to quote one of the people on there, it's not a fair fight. We're not evolved to do the dance properly, to recognize what's going on, and so that exploitation is part of the problem as well.
Well, at a more simple level, the asymmetry of social media. So, for example, if you are a young person and you're trying to find a mate in a town, when you grow up in that town, everybody knows who the hot guy is. Everybody knows who the hot girl is, right? People know the attractive people, and your selection pool for your mate is very small. Now, if you instantly, type, and there, we're going to give everybody a device, and suddenly you have the ability to see every single person in the world who presents themselves as if they're somewhat available. That changes the mental calculus with how you want to select a mate, especially if you're a young person and you're looking to find a person. Sure, that changes things. Different physical attributes become more interesting. I was 4'11" when I turned 16, and so I matured later than most people in life. So imagine the pressure I would have felt had I had social media back then. I'm not jacked and have huge abs, and I'm not even shaven yet. That kind of weird stuff. I can't imagine what that's like to grow up.
When we were kids and people worried that magazines were going to do that to us, it seems so harmless. Like, magazines, really? I think we'll be okay. We can fend that off.
Yeah.
Kids have no chance against movies.
No, they don't.
So you talk about that expand, the place where anybody can go and see literally the best, brightest, hottest from all reaches of planet Earth, and they get to compare themselves to that, which is never going to work out. But now add on to that the fact that you're not even seeing how they actually are. Instagram hot is completely fake. Did you see the tweet this week about somebody built a fake luxury private jet in their living room and were taking pictures like they were jet setting around as an Instagram star, and then they were letting other people use it to take pictures like, I'm just jet setting right now. No, you're in somebody's living room. Look at that. Overpriced dump in a bad neighborhood. Yeah. But that girl's 16 and she jet sets. She's probably going to Italy. I can't compete. But then tag onto that filters. I mean, dude, that's so screwed up. It's fun and it's goofy and all of that too, but it's ridiculous. You're comparing yourself to an oddly computer-enhanced, half-animated version of what they could do. Again, I'll take my chances with a kid in 1992 walking by a 17 magazine. It's a little bit airbrushed. That's how they used to do it. And being like, I'm not as pretty as that girl. I just don't think a kid has any chance, self-esteem-wise, appearance-wise,
Holy
against
crap.
social media. One of the things that really struck me that Tristan guy said, who I thought was great, I like him, I'm rooting for him. At the end, he said that one of the side effects of social media is that there is no more truth. We don't believe anything is true. It abolishes the idea of truth. Paraphrase his mind. That's crazy to me. Because for the second half of the 20th century, and there were a couple of philosophers, it doesn't matter. The whole postmodern thing, as a philosophical movement, post-World War time, a few years ago, was about truth. It's about knowledge. Is anything actually true and real? And it was just fascinating for me to listen to Tristan completely concede the idea that, yes, of course, we did 50 or 60 years of these ridiculous mental exercises about whether anything is actually true or not. Okay, that was a fun thought exercise. But obviously, things are true or not true. Maybe some things are more gray. Maybe some things are more obviously true or not true. The reality is a thing. And so maybe one of the good things that comes out of this conversation is that we move past that relativistic thought exercise, which I think was good. It got us to a place of realizing, okay, fundamentalism is screwed. Not every creative can be a man stuff is like some stuff is also just real, true facts. And maybe this is a thing that brings everybody from all different perspectives and philosophies together to say, okay, truth is a thing. We can talk about the limits of truth and knowledge. But I found it encouraging that one of the things that Tristan feels like he needs to push back on is knowledge that truth is a condition. There's no such thing. I'm glad to have him as a pal on the idea that at least some things are true and not true.
Yeah, so I've mentioned this quote to you in the past. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah, great.
I've tried to figure out who said that. It's been attributed to Teddy Roosevelt. It's been attributed to many different people. They don't really know who said it. However, it rings true. It makes a lot of sense. Like, I am happy with what I have until I see what other people have. That's beyond me. Or even if it's different, the grass is always greener kind of thing. I remember being in Honduras when that was, and being at the top of this mountain and seeing these